Welcome to this lecture on U.S. history, 1877 to present. Today's topic will focus on the period of rapid industrialization during the initial post-Civil War period entitled the Gilded Age. Here are the lecture's main points. The beginnings of the Gilded Age will be explored. The rise of large business owners and entrepreneurs nicknamed robber barons. The development of corporations and trusts will also be discussed. Finally, the initial downsides of Gilded Age and beginnings of the progressive movement with trust busting. The United States became a massive industrial power between 1870 and 1900. International markets, new products, new inventions, and the expanse of the country's economic infrastructure was occurring at a fast pace. There are several driving factors that were fueling this change. Railroads led the way for expansion, oil began refining for commercial usage, and steel will become the newest building material. Corporations began and became the dominant force in the industrialized economy. These were large-scale business enterprises that allowed businessmen to invest and protect their money through limited liability, meaning that investors were guaranteed their investments in case of bankruptcy. Corporations also enjoyed political and legal protection as well, since court cases deemed that corporations were people, shielding them from some legal processes. Railroads led the charge into the rapid industrialization of the economy. Railroads opened up new markets and were themselves large-scale consumers of products such as steel and coal. Cornelius Vanderbilt, the king of the railroads. Originally involved with the shipping business, he invested heavily in railroads, expanding the industry and aggressively acquiring other railroads, perfecting a tactic we know today as a hostile takeover. Oil would become one of the most profitable industries in the country in the Gilded Age, and the oil produced would be refined into kerosene. The first oil strike occurred in Titusville, Pennsylvania in 1859, but large-scale drilling would occur in the 1870s. However, it was a disorganized system that was chaotic and wasteful. John D. Rockefeller would provide that stability and make him enormously rich in the process. Founding Standard Oil in 1870, Rockefeller used aggressive horizontal integration tactics to create the country's first monopoly. In horizontal integration, a business gains control over other businesses with the same product. This occurred by either buying them outright or gaining control over a certain market that was essential to the oil refining process, thereby making him the sole provider. Another product, steel, became the new choice of building material. Originally, steel was produced in small amounts and used for small items such as flatware, utensils, and tools, but Carnegie helped develop mass production of steel. As a result, the first skyscrapers and warships were being produced from steel. Andrew Carnegie, a true rags-to-riches story. A poor immigrant from Scotland, he quickly became a strong businessman, managing a railroad and eventually began work in the steel industry. In 1892, he founded the Carnegie Steel Company, and he utilized vertical integration business practices. In vertical integration, one controls the entire process involved with the finished product. In Carnegie's case, he controlled acquiring raw materials, steel production, and transportation in the entire business. Financial groups and investors also increased their power and influence in the business world. Investments, stock trading, and financial consolidations were ways of controlling different industries and bringing them together to create conglomerates. J.P. Morgan was the most powerful investment banker and financier during the Gilded Age. Nicknamed the Emperor of Wall Street, J.P. Morgan used his financial power to found companies such as U.S. Steel and General Electric. His methods of consolidating weak businesses into larger entities became his trademark move, appropriately called Morganization. These corporations and men controlling them became immensely wealthy and powerful, but why? Why were so few generating so much profit, and why were so many left behind on the bottom of the economic ladder? Laissez-faire was the economic practice of the Gilded Age, meaning let things alone. It meant that if businesses operated on their own terms, natural market forces would allow for natural expansion and profit-making. This had a twofold result. Government regulations on business were minimal, and it allowed for individual self-interest to determine the course of business. Social Darwinism, developed by Herbert Spencer, stated that some individuals were more adept to survive in social and economic situations. Some were suited to build and run businesses, while others were only suited for the work and not have the ability to become strong entrepreneurs. Many linked this idea of social Darwinism with financial success, and personal merit explained their wealth and status. Some capitalists, such as Andrew Carnegie, do not completely subscribe to this idea of social Darwinism. Carnegie believed that the wealthy had an obligation to assist the working class and poor. In his speech, Gospel of Wealth, Carnegie believed that a man who dies rich dies disgraced because they didn't do anything worthwhile with their money. As a result, Carnegie began founding libraries and other philanthropies that assisted the working class. Other captains of industry would follow in his philanthropic fervor in their later years. Starting in the upper left corner and moving clockwise, there is the Carnegie Library in Pittsburgh, the Rockefeller Foundation Board of Directors, the J.P. Morgan Museum and Library, and finally, Vanderbilt University. However, despite these early philanthropic endeavors, there are numerous social and labor problems that plagued the public during the Gilded Age. The time period had vilified the capitalists as robber barons. They were viewed as these men who acquired vast amounts of wealth and neglected their workers in the process. Robber barons quickly became a derogatory term for any wealthy industrialist and were hated by the public. Workers endured low wages, long hours, no form of workers' compensation or workplace safety, and working in these early factories was very dangerous. The gap between rich and poor was growing every year, and it soon became relevant to address this uneven distribution of wealth and question the business practices of the corporations and capitalists. In 1890, the Sherman Anti-Trust Act was passed, which allowed the government to examine and pass legislation that prohibited the formation and practice of trust companies. Politicians were initially hesitant to go after these companies, but President Theodore Roosevelt would lead the charge in trust busting after 1901. Large trusts were now broken up, eventually formed the companies that we know today. For example, the companies that formed from the Standard Oil Trust breakup were Exxon, Chevron, and Mobil.